I'm Marc Nivet. I serve as the Chief Diversity Officer for the Association of American Medical Colleges. So, when you go fourth or fifth or whatever I'm going, your talk automatically falls into the category of everything's been said, but not by everybody, so now it's my turn. But while they're setting up the technology, let me ask you to do something, because you've been sitting a long time. Just raise your hands for me, everyone, and wiggle your fingers. Slap them together, put it down on your lap. Okay, how many people have their right thumb over the left thumb? Raise your hand. Okay, those are the sexy people. All right. How many people have it over the left over the right? Okay, those are the sneaky people. All right, how many people have it together just like this? Anybody? One in the back, wow. Look out for her, she's sneaky and sexy. Okay, one more time, up, together, down. How many people have it the exact same way that you had it before? Just about everybody. Put it back down. Now here's what I want you to do. Just switch your thumb. Just switch it over. Tell me how it feels. Yell it out. I don't like it. What else? Weird. Awkward. Did someone say invigorating? What? Weird, strange, odd. What else? Unsettling. Just think about that. Something as inconsequential as moving your thumb over. These are the words we use to describe them. That's the feeling we have when we're talking about an inconsequential change. Now, the neuroscientists, neurologists, psychiatrists, they've all tried to figure out why we do it the same way every time. Some believe it was just, embedded in our head. We became path dependent the first time we did it there. It sort of wrote a code and it stuck, and that's the way we do our thumbs. But when we break path dependency, it becomes uncomfortable, strange, odd. And that's what I think, knowing this group and knowing the work that you've been doing for the last 2 days, this is what we've been trying to do, which is to bust our normal patterns or disrupt or interrupt our usual patterns of behavior and systems and protocols. And I know we're talking a lot about finance over the next 2 days. I hope that's not...
You saying cell phone?
I thought I took it out. There you go. Thanks. You'll see, that was important that I had that cell phone, but I'll get to it a different way. That's all right. I'll make the point without the cell phone. And hopefully they'll get the PowerPoint up here in a second. But the point is, our unit of analysis for most of this weekend has really been about finance. And I get it. It's important. Finance is critical to ensuring that we change the behaviors. Behavioral economics is critically important. I get it. And I understand why we would spend so much time talking about macro and all kind of payment reforms. But I can just tell you from my own humble experience, I need this PowerPoint. I'm not even into my presentation yet, so you guys look like you gave up. I have a really good presentation here. I'm just dancing at this point. God, you guys make it different. Make me go fifth, and then I have to deal with technology challenges. So my real point is, I think we need to spend as much time thinking about the cultural changes that we need, and not so much focused on the finance. So let me ask, anyone in the room know who this is? No question. Does anyone know what he's holding? What cell phone? What is it called? The brick. Someone knows it's the brick. The shoe phone. So this is Martin Cooper. And Martin invented the cell phone. Martin is still alive, by the way. He lives in Chicago or lives in Illinois. And Martin invented the cell phone. And that's the first version of the cell phone, called the brick. Anybody had a brick? Wow, interesting. Does anyone know how this came about? How we got to the cell phone? Here's how it happened. Now, let me preface this by saying I don't think that we need to use drugs to enhance our ability to think differently. But my guess is Martin was on drugs for a period of time. So here's what's happened. At Motorola, They asked him, he was an engineer at Motorola, and they said, here's $30 million. We need you to create the next generation cell phone, or next generation car phone. And most people don't realize this, but car phones have been around since the 1940s. So creating the next car phone was the next big industry innovation, going to update it. Martin went on vacation. I'm going to assume alcohol was involved. And he asked himself a very important question. He said, why, whenever we have to make a phone call, we have to call a place? You have to call an office. You have to call a car. And some of you might remember we had payphones at one point, right? You had to call one of these payphones. And Martin said, why can't we call the person directly? He comes back from vacation. He goes to Motorola. He says, guys, I don't want to create the next generation car phone. I'm interested in creating something very different. And they said, well, what's it going to cost? And he said $50 million. So $20 million more. How long do you think it took him to create that prototype that you see there? That's the actual working one, but a prototype. How long? Take a guess. Yell out. 5 years. What else? Yell out. How long does it take? 30 days. 60 days. What does that tell you? What does 60 days tell you? You wish you wish you could find a stock that easy, right? That you could invest in. Think about that. It tells you that everything you needed to create the cell phone was already in existence. There were already cell towers. It was the power of the question that unleashed the innovation. It's the power of asking the right question. It wasn't simply path dependent, let's create the next generation car phone. Here's what we deal with. Some of you remember 2014 or 2015, I guess, the European Space Agency, they were able to probe a comet. I want you to think about that for a moment. If you know anything about a comet, it's traveling about 4 times the speed of a bullet, right? It's rotating mightily, and they were able to probe that. That's complexity, right? How much did that complexity cost? $1.8 billion. This is what we eat for lunch, certainly in academic medicine, but in medicine, we eat complexity for lunch. We were dealing with the Ebola virus. We were dealing with the transfer from patient to provider. Hopkins and other teams came up, and we solved that. We eat complexity for lunch. But what we're talking about here is not complexity. It's a different kind of problem that we're talking about. Ambiguity. So for example, just here's a couple of within the last year, how much money we've spent on just trying to address poverty, not eradicate poverty. Federal government, how much did they spend? Last year, $943 billion. Think about that, complexity. Actually, we could probably solve the mathematical equation it takes to probe a comet in this room. We probably have the intelligence to do that, mathematical abilities to do that, if we come together to do that. We don't have the ability to solve poverty, not in this room. Not right. If we did, we would have done that already. Right? Because it's an ambiguous problem. What kind of problem is it? Is it a religious problem? Is it an economic problem? Is it an educational problem? Is it a healthcare problem? Is it a community problem? It's all of that and more, which makes it an ambiguous problem. Yet we all come at that ambiguity with our own hammer, our own way of addressing that issue. And so we talk about things that we can control. So we have to balance the scales, right? We spend too much. You heard it multiple times this morning. We spend too much on healthcare, don't get the outcomes we desire. So what we need to do is to think about this, go back. This is nothing new, by the way. This is my point about the tools exist to do this. It's the same as how we created the cell phone. Everything we need is there. It's just that we're looking at our limited lens, through our limited lens, right? So the biological, psychological, sociological, right? We know this. This is public health 101. We don't leverage it, right? I think we talk a lot about interdisciplinarity, and I think that doesn't go far enough. Because again, that's still path dependent. We've had interprofessional care for decades in this country. So now we're talking about interprofessional education as though it's this fantastic innovation. And maybe it is. And maybe it will help move the needle a little bit. But like the previous speakers have all said, if we truly want to disrupt or interrupt our usual patterns, we need to think differently and ask different questions. And so, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Once we start to move, that's what we currently do, multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity. It's an improvement. But what happens if we think about transdisciplinarity? Move beyond our medical model or healthcare model, or even what we think about as just health model currently. What if we start thinking about what's the role of architecture? And do we have degrees in a public health degree in architecture? There might be 1 or 2 out there, but we probably need more. We've talked about medical legal partnerships. You're well aware of those, but that too doesn't go far enough. Right? What law and public health degrees do we have combined? The very design, how do we actually co-design health? Right? And it's not about interprofessional education. It's not about interprofessional practice. It goes beyond that to transdisciplinary practice, education, and adding people, our patients, as part, as you've heard earlier today, part of uncovering, unmasking the solutions that we're all struggling to find. So I think, as I started, that it's not about bending the cost curve alone. Is that important? Absolutely. But it's really about bending the culture curve. And what's the culture we're trying to create or co-create with our patients? And I think we have to ask ourselves different questions. So my hope for the next day that you're today, and I don't know if you're continuing tomorrow, is that we'll ask different questions. But I want to submit to you that I think transdisciplinarity is the antidote to ambiguity. We're not going to solve these ambiguous challenges we face by simply thinking about interdisciplinary care teams, thinking about rejiggering our finance model. It's not going to get us far enough. We need to truly be transdisciplinary in our thinking. Thank you.